Hi everyone, I'm Ted Yacucci. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel today. Ooh, I think we've got a really good one today because we together are going to explore what happened to the real killer of Officer J.D. Tippit in the JFK assassination. Now, if you remember, we know that Mrs. Aquila Clemens and others saw two shooters involved in the Officer Tippit shooting. She saw one shooter that was rather short and stocky, and then another shooter that somewhat resembled Lee Oswald, although she said it wasn't Lee Oswald, but someone that resembled his physical characteristics. And she said that the shorter, stockier man kind of waved on the Oswald characteristic looking gentleman, if you will, and that he unloaded his revolver and then loaded it up again, kind of making a show and making sure that other people would see the shells that he had dropped. And then he went and he was on 10th Street, made a left on Patton Street, went down to Jefferson Street, made a right on Jefferson Street, went into the back of the Texaco, and then we're supposed to believe that maybe he left his jacket there, kind of doubled back, and went on to the Texas Theater. Well, he didn't leave his jacket there and then double back and go to the Texas Theater. What he did is really obvious and it's right in front of our faces. And we have to thank a lot of early research that really didn't get publicized, but was really understood by Jim Garrison when he was conducting his trial of Clay Shaw a few years later in 1967 and 1968 in New Orleans. And we're going to examine that evidence today and make some determinations. And I think that you're going to agree with me by the time we get to the end that we really know what happened, at least to that actual shooter of Officer Tippit, the man that went down Patton Street, then Jefferson Street, and then cut into the Texaco. So let's, without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump right into it because this stuff is really interesting. We know that Officer J.D. Tippit was way out of his assigned patrol area at the time that President Kennedy was shot down in Dealey Plaza. And we know that Officer Tippit lied about his location to his dispatcher. Officer Tippit was actually sitting in his patrol car at the Gloco station, located right across the Houston Street Aqueduct. From this position, Officer Tippit could see all of the traffic coming from downtown Dallas. When the Marcellus Street bus did not stop near the Gloco, Officer Tippit pulled out onto Zhang Avenue and followed it quickly. We don't know 100% whether Officer Tippit stopped James Andrews before or after going into the Top 10 record store, but when he did stop Mr. Andrews, he didn't say a word to him, and he pulled in front of Andrews' car to stop him. He got out quickly, looked in the back seat of Andrews' car, and when he didn't see anything, ran back to his patrol car and took off without saying one word to Mr. Andrews. From there, Officer Tippit went to the Top 10 record store where he got out of his patrol car and entered the store, asked clerk Louis Cortinez if he could use the phone. When he dialed the phone, he waited for 8 or 9 rings, didn't seem to get an answer, put the phone down, and quickly ran out of the store, back in his patrol car, and proceeded to 10th and Patton, where he would be killed. I think that Officer J.D. Tippit's knowledge of and participation in the JFK assassination has been clearly established a long time ago. And we can see by his actions of being out of his patrol area, of clearly waiting for someone to come across that Houston Street aqueduct, and then probably the Marcellus Street bus. And when it didn't stop, he pulled out after it. We know that he had kind of just chaotic actions by pulling over a motorist, James Andrews, without saying a word to him, pulling in front of him, and then going into the top 10 record store to use a private telephone, making a call, and then seeming again to be just in a panic, heading out to his car and then to 10th and Patton. So we know that Officer Tippit clearly was on a mission. But, what his actual mission was is still certainly being debated. But we know that when he left the top 10 record store, just a few minutes later, he was at 10th and Patton where he was killed. So let's go ahead now and look at what happened when Officer Tippit was shot at 10th and Patton. Officer Tippit seemed to have a location that he was headed to after leaving the top 10 record store, and that location was the area around 10th and Patton Streets. The official story states that Officer Tippit was driving his patrol car slowly down the street when he pulled to the curb to talk to a young man who was walking on the sidewalk. That young man had a conversation with Officer Tippit through the passenger side vent window. And then when Officer Tippit got out of the driver's side patrol car, that man shot Officer Tippit 4 times. Now, there are multiple witnesses that 2 men were involved in the shooting of Officer Tippit. The most famous of the witnesses was Mrs. Aquila Clemens, who told her story to journalist and lawyer Mark Lane, but who was never called before the Warren Commission. Another person who saw 2 men involved in the shooting of Officer Tippit was Mrs. Doris Holen, who lived in the family apartment right across the street from where Officer Tippit was gunned down. Now, Mrs. Dolan had a unique viewpoint of the murder of Officer Tippit because her family apartment was directly across the street from where Officer Tippit was murdered. So she, as a witness to having 2 people involved in the murder of Officer Tippit, is really important. But just as important is the view that Mrs. Dolan had of the alleyway behind her. It would be to the right of where Officer Tippit's car was parked. So she had a perfect view of the alleyway between the houses where Officer Tippit's car was parked when he was murdered. And in that alleyway, she saw and reported a police car. Now, that's interesting. She also saw, of course, 2 people involved in the killing of Officer Tippit. So, probably the person that's done the best research and writing about this is author John Armstrong. And he makes a really, I think, ironclad case that involved, or I should say, the 2 participants or occupants of that police car were Captain W.R. Westbrook of the Dallas Police Department and Reserve Officer Kenneth Croy. And I won't get into the details about that. We don't have enough time. I've done some other work on that I hope you'll look at. But suffice it to say that Mrs. Dolan actually, and others, actually saw a police car there with 2 people involved in the murder of Officer Tippit. Now, how do we know there probably was them just in general? Well, it's because Kenneth Croy, Reserve Officer Kenneth Croy, was photographed handing a wallet to Captain W.R. Westbrook. And then Westbrook went around asking whether anyone knew who this wallet belonged to. And the name in the wallet was Lee Oswald and Alex Hiddell. So it was a wallet that was supposedly found that belonged to Lee Oswald, but then all of a sudden this wallet just totally disappears and is never dealt with again. So that's just primary evidence that Croy and Westbrook were trying to set up Oswald, according to whatever plan they thought was going on, by finding a supposed wallet that belonged to Lee Oswald. Okay, so now we get to the real crux of this video. What happened to the man who actually shot Officer Tippit? Well, we know because of all the witnesses that saw him that he made a show of unloading his revolver and then reloading the revolver. And he walked to the corner and he made the left on Patton Street. We know that. He walked down about a block and a half and he made the right on Jefferson Street. And he went down to the Texaco, where we're supposed to believe that he went to the parking lot behind the Texaco and took off his jacket and left it there. Then we're supposed to believe, according to the Warren Commission, that he kind of doubled back to Jefferson Street and went to the Texas Theater. Now, that really makes no sense when you really think about it, because he was being followed by some people and was being viewed up until the time that, he went to the into that Texaco parking lot, right? So, and no one saw him double back to Jefferson Street and go to the Texas Theater. There's not one witness that saw him do that. So what did he do? Well, when he went into that Texaco parking lot, where was he? He was right in front of 10th and Crawford Street. And right at the corner of 10th Street and Crawford Street is the Abundant Life Temple. And that's where the shooter went. He rated that position as the back door to the Abundant Life Temple. And I am totally convinced that that's where he went. That's where he was always going to go. Why else would he make a show of loading and unloading the weapon and then just take off on foot? Of course he would have been caught, right? But he was only going about 2 blocks and he knew exactly where he was going. He was going to this place, the Abundant Life Temple, which so conveniently was not being used at the time, but was open. And of course, that was a location that had been rented by the conspirators, the same as a location on Harlandale Avenue in Oak Cliff had been rented by the conspirators, and a multitude of meetings had taken place there, including some where Lee Oswald had been seen, and then he was trying to infiltrate the group at that point. And of course, and that over in Oak Cliff, that actually closed just a couple of days before the assassination. But getting back to the Abundant Life Temple, that was where, not only was it where the shooter went, but it was where he was seen going. There were a number of phone calls that went into the Dallas police that said he went into the Abundant Life Temple. And the police started showing up there and closing in on it. But what happened then? They all got calls about the supposed shooter being seen in the Texas Theater. So they leave there and they go to the Texas Theater, and it's never even checked out. It makes such perfect sense. Okay, now our story doesn't stop there. It really, in some ways, it's just getting started, because what does Officer Captain W.R. Westbrook do now? Well, somehow he's in the car, and he's going to tell like 5 different stories about this. We never do get one final story, but supposedly he's in the car behind the Texaco that finds Lee Oswald's jacket. And that's what the Warren Commission will say. He will say that, no, it really wasn't him. It was an officer, but he can't remember who the officer was. He'll also make references that he can't remember who the officer was that was driving the patrol car when they found the jacket, if you can believe that or not. Okay. But it gets better. Then he goes to the Texas Theater. Okay. Well, first of all, did he pick up this shooter? Did he pick up Tippit's shooter in the Abundant Life Temple? Was he parked in that alleyway where Officer Tippit was shot? And did he then pull out onto all the way back up to Jefferson Street and go down to 10th and Crawford Street, where the Abundant Life Temple is, and then pick up the shooter of Officer Tippit. We don't really know that, right? But it's very possible because what happens? This There is two Oswalds that somehow are arrested in the Texas theater just minutes after all this stuff happens, right? And Officer Westbrook goes there. Okay, so the real Lee Oswald is arrested in the main section, the first floor of the Texas Theater. He's brought out the front door. Very famous photos, right? 2 or 3 minutes after that, there is a second Oswald and an Oswald lookalike that is arrested in the balcony of the Texas Theater, and then taken out the back door of the theater, where Butch Burroughs, the guy who takes tickets and sells popcorn and concessions, plus Bernard Hare, who owns the hobby shop 2 doors down, plus a whole throng of other people. They see this second Oswald being arrested from the back door of the Texas Theater. For the next 8, 10 years, they believe they saw the real Lee Oswald being arrested. But he gets driven away. Well, who drove this second Oswald away? Was it W.R. Westbrook? I think it probably was. And then that is the Lee Oswald that is seen in the El Chico restaurant parking lot across from Mac Pate's garage, which we looked at just in a very recent video, and where he's in a red Ford Falcon, the license plate's taken down, it comes back to a Carl Mather of Collins Radio, right? So we know that whole story. Okay. What doesn't really make sense to me is why Westbrook would have picked up the real shooter of Officer Tippit in the Abundant Life Temple and then taken him to the Texas Theater. That still is very unclear in my mind. There had to be some plan or some secondary plan, a plan B, if Oswald maybe wasn't there when they got there, who knows? But it makes no sense to me that you would have the fake Oswald actually in the same location with a lot of police closing in. And what happened? He got arrested. Now, that may be the real clue to how we solve this whole JFK assassination mystery because of that mistake. But we do know that the shooter of Officer Tippit was in the Abundant Life Temple. Jim Garrison did a wonderful, wonderful examination of all of the ownership of the Abundant Life Temple. And I hope to present that in another video when I get to some other stuff about Jim Garrison. But there is almost no doubt that this location at 10th and Crawford, it's the only thing that makes sense. It's the only way that the shooter of Officer Tippit could have gone from Jefferson Street, just off Jefferson Street, to the Texaco parking lot and then disappeared. Right at that Texaco parking lot is the back door of the Abundant Life Temple at 10th and Crawford. He's seen gone in there. It had to be where he hid out.